All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Behind the Human. I'm your host, Mark Champagne, and it's my job to unpack the stories and mental fitness practices of people living at the top of their game personally and professionally. And we definitely have someone on the show that definitely describes that definition or makes up that definition. We've got Kelly on the show, who's the writer and director of Heal. I mean, that's a documentary that's come out. What was the original year, Kelly?
It was end of 2017, so
end
December.
Of 2017, which, yeah. I mean, obviously, I didn't know you at that point. I probably watched it right at that period and have come full circle, essentially, because I obviously rewatched it for this, and you're doing, a bunch of other things as well. And it just feels so appropriate to the times that we're in right now that, I don't know who we need to speak to from the distribution world, but we need to give a good push for this topic. So needless to say, welcome to the show. I'm rambling here, but welcome to the show.
Thank you. I love I'm a rambler as well, so I appreciate
Perfect. Before we get into all the topics and all things health and your next phase and journey and chapter in life and so forth, I start the show in the same way for everyone. And that's to avoid all of these job titles and our work and whatnot. And it's just, who are you?
Who am I? I'm just a girl in front of a guy. No.
I love it.
What movie is that from? Jerry Maguire, maybe? But yeah, who am I? I mean, these days I would say I'm a mom doing the best I can, raising an almost 5-year-old. And I'm a seeker. I just love, I have this insatiable desire to understand how the universe works and understand consciousness and spirituality and learn from the masters and just, achieve human potential. Although I say that's the intention, and then I still do self-sabotaging human shit every day. So I'm just a human.
Yeah, I was going to say, shocking, you're a human. Yeah. Well, thank you for saying that or admitting that point, because I think a lot of us just don't. And especially, and I find this as well, especially for those of us that are in this field, let's just say, of just doing what we can with our gifts to help ourselves as well as others when it comes to health or development and growth and so forth. And I feel like there's almost an added layer of pressure around, I was at this big men's circle locally here. There's 40 or 50 guys, and it was just basically a men's group for the evening. And there was a question that was asked. We were in smaller groups and just open shares, essentially, and talking about emotions. But one of the questions was, from 1 to 10, because I was the opening speaker, so there was a link to mental fitness. So the question was, how mentally fit do you feel you are right now, 1 to 10? And I remember sitting there, Kelly, I was thinking, I feel like I should be answering 8 and above, given the work that I do, right? But in that moment, I was like, I'm probably about a 5 to be and I think it oscillates, but I don't know. I feel like it's hard. I don't know. Do you get that as well? Just being in this work, that you feel this pressure of, I need to be, everything and anything for all things related to healing and development and growth.
Totally. I mean, people reach out all the time. They're like, please share your workouts, your diet. I'm like, you would not follow me if you knew what I ate every day. I am not a health and wellness influencer. Excuse me.
Yeah.
So yeah, and just, raising a kid and having resources and having help, and I have every excuse not to be stressed, and I have all the tools in the tool belt, and I still am human and stressed, and I just feel like everything is very relative, and based on that foundation of mental resilience that you have, and then of course, the more awareness and personal development you do, the more you can strengthen that foundation or change the programming. But it definitely, the best thing you said is it oscillates, because we are faced with different challenges that, are going to challenge our mental fitness, and collectively, individually, it's just part of life and how we grow and evolve.
What are I normally kind of dovetail into this near usually the end of the interviews, but just since we're talking about it, I'd love to ask you, I think it's appropriate, but like, what are some of your non-negotiable practices or rituals that you find when you're in those loops, help you get out of it or pause it or allow you to zoom out and get some kind of higher wisdom clarity, I guess you could say?
Yeah. Meditation is my crutch,
go-to.
my go-to, not only just mental hygiene, but just spiritual connection. And, you just get that, just that feeling of peace and a little taste of, if you can drop in that just kind of like all-encompassing love and safety. So meditation every day, and then nature. Like I'm a water baby, so I'm blessed to live by the ocean. I get in the ocean every day. Yeah. Movement is movement and movement's big for me. I used to run. I've been an athlete. I played, many sports growing up, mostly soccer. And so running to me just mentally just clears the cache,
Oh, yeah.
And so movement is big, sweating, jumping in the ocean, and meditation are probably my 3 pillars.
Okay.
And then if there's momentum of stress and you find yourself in that spiral or that meltdown, sleep. I always try to just focus on sleep to disrupt that momentum, because it is momentum. And so just putting myself to bed, is kind of a trick that I.
It's wild because sleep, movement, even just jumping in the ocean. These are they're just basic things of life in a way, right? Like just nature, but we tend to try to overcomplicate everything all the time, right? But if we can just take a minute, okay, do I feel rested? I had someone on from Whoop, the Kristen Holmes, a few weeks back, and she had a really good question that stuck with me. It's just, can I fall asleep when I want to fall asleep? And do I feel energized when I want to be energized? Which is just, just a simple question, but how many, and I, myself included, wow, maybe it's not as much as I'd like to. And we just need to go to sleep maybe a little bit earlier. Nothing crazy, maybe 30 minutes earlier, and just test it out, see how you feel. You don't need a bunch of technology to tell you whether you're sleeping or not. It's helpful, but just try going to bed earlier or try shifting some things up, right?
Yeah. And most people just because so much is available to us, they think that, it's normal to have to take something to go to sleep or stay asleep. Yeah. And it's that is so not normal,
No.
And to counterbalance the caffeine that you needed in the afternoon to blow through your adrenals to get your shit done, to keep up with the Joneses. It's just it really does come back to the basics of just what nature intended and what our bodies need. But it's hard. It's hard to feel productive in society and keep up if you're not, caffeinating and ignoring your body's symptoms,
It's almost like we need to reestablish or reset what normal is. Because I think you raise a really good point there. And I was talking to someone recently where they were talking about sleep and just completely in a normal way said, oh yeah, I take a gravel before I go to bed every night and sleep really well. And what? I almost had to hold it in, right? Are you kidding me right now? That's not normal,
no,
right?
I know.
So it's just, this might be a nice segue into a lot of the work that you do and you've done and so forth around Heal. But where do you think we're at when it comes to a lot of, and maybe give the listeners some perspective around how Heal came to be and what it's all about. But where do you think we're at today, given that documentary released, years back? And I feel like we're having, a lot of similar conversations at this point. Of course, there's been some evolution and whatnot, but there's no shortage of more work to do, let's just say. Which, keeps us all, motivated because we can help, and that's what we're trying to do. But yeah, what is Heal? Sorry, this is a bunch of questions. What is Heal, and where do you think we are today with just the topic?
Yeah, and first off, before I forget all those questions you just asked, I just want to say, I was thinking about this because I'm going to record a solo podcast tomorrow, and I'm we are so inundated with content. So I just want to say to your listeners, thank you so much for, listening, spending the time, the valuable time out of your life right now to listen to us have this conversation. And both of our intention is to help people. But it's just like we are so overwhelmed with content, that is stressful in itself. So just honoring everybody that's in this conversation collectively, energetically is really cool. It's just like we're in it together right now.
Yeah,
this moment.
Totally.
But Heal, for those who don't know, is a film, documentary, feature length that essentially came out of people coming up to me at a time in my life where I was just, flooding my mind because I was kind of a frustrated actress in LA. And I grew up in LA and acted my whole life, but I had these, big visions of winning Academy Awards and being validated, externally for my worth, basically. I looked at actors. I mean, I loved this art of storytelling in film. I thought the medium was very powerful. It moved me, and I wanted to be a part of that and move other people. And then I want to be the best at anything I do. So later in my 20s, as that was not being achieved, and I was getting rejected for years upon years, that takes a toll. So I turned to just really flooding my mind with things like Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now, and Wayne Dyer's books, Power of Intention, and learned about the law of attraction through The Secret. Yeah. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I was waking up to the fact that we're co-creators with life, and our thoughts and our beliefs and, what we're focusing on really does change our reality. And so after a few years of people coming up to me like, how are you manifesting all this good stuff? Like, what do you eat? What do you do? This is, long before social media. And I said, I'm just going to put all my teachers in a film to empower you to know that there's so much more. And at the time, people were just, so many people had these diagnoses, and cancer was becoming more prevalent. And I mean, it's like way like wildfire right now, which is really just terrifying and sad. But this was, 2008, 9, 10, so 14, 15 years ago. And I just said, I'm going to put all my teachers that empowered me into a film and weave it together to show people like that we have so much more, that we live in a world of infinite possibility, and we have so much more power than we've been led to believe. Yeah. And it
were
just
you excited? Like, did you even realize that your two probably most passionate topics in life were coming together? Or were you doing that intentionally, or it just kind of happened?
It just kind of happened, Okay. And it was one of those things, like, I was not qualified, even though I grew up on sets my whole life and I always wanted to be a director. I had never had formal training in directing, so I was like, I sat on it for like 7 years. It was marinating,
Oh, wow.
And then I'd find another book and I'd be like, oh my gosh. And then I read Bruce Lipton's book, The Biology of Belief, and learned about epigenetics, and we're not victims of our genes. And then it became more about health and healing, because I was like, oh my gosh, everybody needs to know this. And then I read, a couple of years later, I read Dying to Be Me by Anita Moorjani, which is, to me, she's the poster child of heal and possibility, because she was riddled with cancer on her last breath, and she had a near-death experience, came back into her body with that shift in consciousness, and her physical body completely caught up to that new consciousness of love as opposed to fear, and it healed within 3 weeks. And that, to me, is miraculous and potential. So it kind of like the miracles became more about healing, even though I had never had like a serious diagnosis or, thank God, like hadn't dealt with loss from a massive terminal illness or anything. So it's kind of strange that I did this, but it was just this calling, and I had to do it. Like it was a calling that I could not deny. And that's how heal became heal. And I just said at some point, listening to Michael Beckwith at Agape International Spiritual Center in LA. And he's just like, if, God put the calling in your heart, you have everything it takes to see it through. There's a reason you have your dreams. You also have the ability to realize those dreams. So I just kind of believed him because it resonated, and I felt on fire when I listened to him. And so I said, okay, I say yes, but God, you do the work, because I don't know what I'm doing. And it just all unfolded really beautifully. Not without challenges, but just beautifully.
Yeah, of course. But you literally put your bookshelf on film, which is pretty awesome, right?
Yeah. And luckily, most people said yes, and where there was a no, it led to 3 more yeses that I didn't even know existed,
Sure. And it's been, I mean, I don't know where, I guess it depends on where in the world you're, like what kind of distribution you have and whatnot. At least in North America, Canada, and the US, the Heal is currently on Amazon Prime. I don't know if that's across the entire world or if it's different spots.
It is, yeah.
But it is, okay.
Yeah. So it did Netflix for a run. And it's funny, it still circulates as this, people post this meme all the time. It's like top 8 Netflix documentaries that you must see, but it's not on Netflix anymore. But I'm like, see, you're missing out, Netflix. But
exactly, right?
So. It's kind of funny.
Regardless, I mean, I can't, I mean, this is not a plug of, it is a plug. I should gratefully say that this is a plug because I think everyone should watch this because it doesn't matter whether you're, up against an illness of some sort or going, everyone has some sort of stress or there's some sort of trauma or, I mean, we just literally need to step outside and get hit with life in general. And like you said, there's so much content out there. I mean, I just feel like if we leave ourselves on autopilot, we know where that leads. I mean, there's good data and we can see it. Like all of us have something that, we're going through the ups and downs. We definitely know someone that has probably severe struggles with their mind and their body or illness. So it's like, why not just be preventative? I mean, there's preventative, but there's also, of course, in the moment, there's just so much available to us that why wouldn't you ask the questions and just, I guess, be open to, because clearly the current setup is not working.
No,
right?
I mean, the U.S. is technically supposed to be the richest country in the world with the worst health outcomes. We're the sickest country in the world and the richest. That's a big problem, and it is. But once you dive in and you learn, we're just, unfortunately, the medical industry has been captured in certain ways, and we're just very indoctrinated to give our power away. And the doctors, unfortunately, now and again, most intelligent, well-meaning people on the planet, and this is not for any offense, but the system is set up now where pharmaceutical companies are funding the education and the higher learning institutions that are training our doctors. And you're a fish in water. You don't realize, but you're learning about disease. You're not learning about health and how to stay healthy. Yeah. And then the insurance system and the hospital system and the all the paperwork and the bureaucracy that and the litigation and the doctors have to protect themselves from this sue-happy society we've created. So they're not able, their hands are tied. They're only able to give a certain level of care in a small amount of time. So they don't have the time or the capacity unless they leave that system, the insurance system, and go into private uncovered practice, functional medicine, integrative, and to give people the care and the time and the investigation needed to get to the root cause. Most doctors are just trained to look for the problem and throw a pill or a surgery or an intervention at the symptom rather than get to the root cause.
I think for me, it's what's becoming more and more obvious is that we can either sit back and hope and wait for the big massive system to change, which just seems so unrealistic and probably in our lifetime just won't happen, which then means, okay, well then we can, essentially we're saying we're willing to be a victim of the system. And I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me. And I just believe we all deserve to thrive, at least more days than not, and not every day, but at least have our health to the best of our abilities. And I don't know, I mean, we talked about this when we first met because I was asking you about what would a heal kind of 2.0 look like in present day. And as you were saying all this, it's I would love to see a version of heal today that is almost the lens is what's the most accessible route to different level of care? Because I think to your point, I mean, a lot of the stuff that's brought up, if I think of, going, like a Joe Dispenza kind of talk and so forth, or a program and whatnot, like it costs, it's not something that's covered, obviously. It's well worth, going there, but that's just not accessible for everyone. And he's one of my favorite humans on the planet. It's, so it's like taking those kind of core principles around that there's other alternatives to health and figuring out like what are some paths for people that to make it as accessible as possible. Have you thought about that, or is it something on your mind? I love this.
It's like the practical heal, like what, with minimal resources, how can universally we take control of our power back, without being able to afford necessarily a private functional medicine doctor or going to Whole Foods or, getting organic food all the time. So that's a great idea. It needs to happen. I think that, it's so tough. There's so many different varying economic kind of setups or situations or all over. So, but knowing that like, it's not just our hospital and medical establishment, it's also, and obviously I'm speaking more closely in the United States, but it's kind of all around the Western world. Our food systems are kind of captured by big chemical. And so it's really about like awareness and education. And then like trying to control as much as like the sources of what you're putting in your body, learning about the toxins in our products and air and furniture. And there's so
everywhere.
Much. But it's just, and then like making informed decisions as a consumer that ultimately turns the tanker around. But in the meantime, like growing your own food or supporting your local farmers. And it's just, you have to, the change starts with you. And unfortunately, it just comes with education and awareness, Yeah,
but I like that because we can all start that today, right? And you kind of speaking my language when it comes to questions, just start asking some questions of your environment, of course, your internal environment, your external as well. And like, where is that coming from? Or is there maybe a healthier option when it comes to either products or food and so forth? I'm curious now. I'm sure there's a link here. I know you're just back from New Zealand, and I believe, what was it called? Soil to Soul or Soul to Soil, and good old Zach Bush was out there. So. I know there's a lot. What was your experience? What was that? And can you report back on kind of any insights that you took from that experience?
I can, and I can't. It was I still haven't had time to process. It was so powerful, but it ties into what we were talking about before. It's like the real, we were on this beautiful, it's called a station, a 16,000 acre regenerative farm, but it goes back into the hills and they raise sheep and cattle and just so beautiful. And then we had this like bushman come from the North Island down, Sam, and he was teaching us just all about nature and, he's so connected to the land. And then the owners, Jeff and Justine of Lake Hawea Station, they really want to start to pivot over into like a full regenerative farm. They have to do it little by little, so it economically makes sense. But then also treating the animals more humanely. And so we were talking about just, ascension and evolution of animals coming in to choose to be an offering to, it was just, and just really taking care of and nurturing and changing the way they're shorn. There were so many conversations, but this group of people that were there, we had this Maori woman this is my favorite moment of the trip, but also perhaps one of the most powerful moments of my life. We were in this regenerative paddock that was just like booming, like we pulled turnips out of the ground, and then the sheep and the cows were going to come graze here next. And there's sunflowers and there's just this hugely diverse, all these plants and they're up to our waist and chest, and we're navigating through and we're just there in this vibrance of life. And it's fixing the soil and it's just amazing. And then we look over and there's a cattle paddock, them grazing, and it was mothers and children, kids, or whatever they're called, babies. And And Zach Bush was going on, as he does, very profoundly about life and the circle of life. And he was saying, have you ever looked at a cow and it blinks? You know, humans blink so fast because we're like always on alert. Cows are just chilling. They're just like, they're here and they just blink so slowly. So after we were kind of done in the plant paddock, I said, let's go check out the cattle and watch them blink. You know, I want that experience. And so they all laughed. But then we took our little carts over there. And as we roll up in our, you know, motorized vehicles and we get out, the cows kind of start moving away naturally from the fence. And all of a sudden, Faya, who's this Maori woman, just starts singing her native language, you know, just like having this moment where she just wants to connect. And she's singing out to these cattle and they just turn and they just start walking towards her like in a trance. I was like, what is happening? It was so beautiful and so profound. And it was just, so the moral of the story is, you know, going back to nature is the answer. Nature is so intelligent. Just the design of this planet, how nature interacts with itself. And Zach says his friend, I forget his name right now, but his friend channeled this saying that the antidote is in the wound. So as we're destroying the earth and, you know, with greed and corporate interests and, you know, the nature has its own antidote. It's going to be, you know, and we are part of that wound and the antidote is in us. You know, we're part of the solution as well. We can be. So really the simplest and most accessible way back to health is getting back to nature, and learning from the ancestors and eating local, growing our own food and just simplifying. And nature is so intelligent. And just like the seed of, you know, the oak trees in the oak forest is in one single acorn, and everything that you need to realize your dreams is in that calling and pull in your heart. Like nature has the answers, and it's just so intelligent and so miraculous. And we are part of nature. We've taken ourselves out of nature, but the same thing applies to us. It's so cool.
Well, and I feel it feels comforting in the sense that, like, nature doesn't make mistakes. Like, the world will survive post us. It's us that won't survive in nature and the world if we don't make some changes. So but there's a level of comfort to know that if you slow down and pay attention, there's a perfect system that's literally running. You know, you just have to look and, you know, choose to be a part of it in whatever way you can. And I mean, I had goosebumps when you're telling the story about just like the power of the voice and like connection from, you know, that song or the way that she was bringing those cows back, right? So simple, but isn't it? It's just remarkable. Yeah.
And our ancestors, you know, the indigenous people, they're so connected to the animals, to the land, and understood seasons. And there's just a language and a communication and an intelligence there that we are part of, and we need to get reconnected. And, you know, the solutions will arise. Yeah. It's so cool.
I've been co-hosting. It's not out yet, but we're trying to figure out the best medium to release it in, which I should probably talk to you about this actually. But I've been running this limited series around demystifying psychedelics. And I'm super naive to psychedelics. I have limited experience, but that's kind of what led to the series, was I just wanted to ask questions because I feel like it's all over the place and there's a lot of clickbaity kind of stuff. And as soon as you have that, you're like, what's really true in these scenarios? And as we've been interviewing, you know, people in research and science to governments, as well as people within the tribes and kind of wisdom keepers and storytellers, what's been so obvious is that the medicine is like the small little component of what's coming up, and it's all community and the tradition and the systems that surround, you know, the healing and the clarity and all, and that is, it's just been mind-blowing. You know, that once you, again, just the answers are there, or if we become curious, there's full societies and tribes and people that are like thousands of years of tradition that, like, but for whatever reason, at least in the Western world, like, we just think we're so much more intelligent and we have all the solutions, right? I know my co-host Paul, because he's the opposite of me. He's studying, he's getting his PhD in this work and has lived with tribes for over a decade in and out. But he says they call us their little brother. A lot of these tribes, because they're getting there, like, they understand. But I find it fascinating, right?
I know, and they're like living without power in the Amazon,
exactly,
and they can like call. Zach Bush was saying the same thing. It was like they literally called us in, and we went to this, and they haven't even seen a white man before in their life, but because they're so connected, they had this vision of what was going on in the other world and the modern world, and bringing them. So it's just. And the plants, what I love about, this kind of bursting field of psychedelics and plant medicine is, we get access to that feeling of connection that these indigenous people live in every day. And it changes us. The problem is, so much is available now. And a lot of people are going almost like a drug addiction, even though these are not normal drugs that you go, like, these are initiation. Totally. These journeys are not like, it's not a fun high. It's like you're going in and you have to like really go through the fire, but you're getting beautiful downloads and awareness, and you feel connected to humans, and your heart opens and wonderful things happen. But if you don't approach it with the reverence that it deserves, I mean, these thousands of years of history that are passed down through these indigenous practices and people with access to these plants, whether it's ayahuasca or mushrooms, and they just understand these, really these gifts from spirit that came through them, and these histories. So if you don't approach it with reverence, if you don't take time or don't have the proper facilitator help you integrate after, it's, being abused, and it's not landing, and you're opening portals, and you don't, you really can mess with your mind.
For sure. I mean, that's essentially how this series came about. Because I kept getting asked, because of the mental fitness work that I do, people were always like, well, have you ever worked with anyone in psychedelics and like integration and so forth? I said, no. But literally for 3 years, I just kept getting similar things coming up. Because a lot of the stuff that I do is, as you know, around, journaling flows and questions and so forth, and just small little integration techniques. So eventually and then you see all these headlines of like these like weekend warriors where like, oh, we're going to knock out a generation of trauma on a Saturday and come back. And I'm like, that sounds a little bit fishy. Like, I'm not sure. Yeah. And of course, right. And as soon as we start the interviews, it's like, oh, wow. And then it becomes this like, almost like what you shared with the song and the cows. It's like, you just want to know more. Like, how did she do that? Like, where does that come from? And how can I do something like that over here? How does it fit into like our lives and I guess in our modern world and so forth? And then it becomes this, it's not this short time frame thing. It's to your point where it's a journey. It's not, a one-stop shop situation, right? I do want to ask you, Kelly, I mean, just since it's so fresh in your mind, you're just coming back from this experience, and to if I can pull some of the practical elements of how are you thinking about kind of integrating back into your regular routine and day and the work that you do with, some of these experiences and insights? Like, have you done any kind of journaling or reflection on, I guess, the little micro edits or where you want to go with it? Like, what does that look like for you when you have an experience like this?
It's a great question. And, I flew home, just so much, there's so much self-reflection that happens after it. And what the biggest one that I'm seeing is like, I get the experience and I'm just blown away, heart open, have these massive like healings in the moment. And then I'm rushing on to the next thing because I'm busy and I have obligations and I'm, so I really have to find that balance of taking time. And I'm also, I don't know if you know about human design, I'm also a projector. Yeah. So I have to, like, the most efficient way to be is to meditate and just think, all of that to say, I have to find the balance of and embrace my projectorism, which is to just, I need to investigate, learn, and then let it sink in and have the time and then share when I'm ready. And so, in this like modern paced world, especially in podcasting where you have a schedule. So that's my work right now, is finding out that work-life balance and, also raising a child. Like they take
a bit.
They take a bit and they need a lot, what are my priorities? So I'm just really assessing, like, it's important for me to have a mission and to follow where I'm inspired. But at the same time, I'm responsible for a life. So it's really, you're on your toes all the time. Like I have to be mentally fit so I can be patient. My toddler, who's just an emotional expression machine, she just does what she feels. And I have to model for her. And I think it's okay to model that a woman and a mother works and has a mission. And but at the same time, if I'm stressed out and taking it out on her, like defeating the purpose, so I'm really like, that's the juggle coming back from New Zealand. Like it'd be great if I could just bask in that just spiritual, heart opening that happened for all of us in this intimate, powerful little group. And just the other thing I want to say is, Sam the Bushman, who knows, he's not modern in any sense of the word yet. He grew up in a kind of a rough background. And that's why he was sent off to kind of like a disciplinary situation where they learned. And then he just fell in love with nature. He felt seen, he felt understood. And so he's learned everything about the indigenous ways. And he kept saying around this table, I can't believe I'm here at this table with the Zach Bushes of the world and all of you people. I feel so humble. And we were all just enraptured by him and the knowledge he had. And so that was the other thing, was like every single person, no matter what their background, what their job, they have all of our gifts are needed in this collective, this biodiversity that we see on the earth that's needed in the paddock that's overflowing. Like we need that diversity with people and their gifts and their voices, and so there's just so much to unpack, but it's really about like believing in your value, even if it doesn't look like someone else's, and knowing that the callings in your heart and the things that light you up are what you're supposed to be doing. And it's just as important, whether it's knowing about bushes and trees and how they interact with mycelium and lizards and birds, or, podcasting, or, building cars like down the road. It's just, it just made me like love humanity even more, knowing that we're meant to be a biodiverse culture as well.
I love that. Love humanity. I feel compelled to ask you, from a practical standpoint, since you're graciously sharing like the realness of coming back from a big experience like that, and then coming into what I would say, different circumstances. Everyone has different circumstances in lives, of course, but just even in hearing, you sharing about what's going on and being a mom and so forth. I have a 2 and a 7-year-old and totally understand all of that. A lot of people can resonate with, having gone through some sort of experience and kind of wishing that they had more time to just, like you said, bask in it and really like glean the insights. So I feel compelled to just ask realistically, like what, if you could do something tomorrow for you personally, what would be a mini step in just going back to that experience, or being able to, bask in it in a version that makes sense for you in your life right now? Like what would you do? Would it be the meditation, the ocean, or a run, or journaling? Like what is something you can do, over the next few days that doesn't completely rock your whole world?
Yeah, it would be, the first thing would be slow down, disconnect from this guy right here that saps our attention in every moment. I think I would need to clear a whole entire day, which I think I could accomplish a lot of, basking in integration in one day, but I haven't even done that,
Yeah.
And it would be, I'm writing is journaling is actually, it helps me concretize my experience.
Yeah.
Just repeating. And then I also get downloads and, it just helps me to kind of flush out my inspiration. So I would meditate. I would just have a day where I would go out in nature, maybe hike down the street in Temescal Canyon, Pacific Palisades, California, just to get that space. Because I think that would lock me in or take me back to being in New Zealand, because there's just that same kind of landscape. So get out in nature and then just have quiet time, total disconnection from tech, and just journal, recall, reflect, nap, rest, nature. And, if I communicate at all, communicate with the 5 people that were there with me. Yeah. And just really like anchor it in, that would be really helpful for me. So thank you for telling me what I need to be doing.
Well, you told yourself, but I mean,
prompting me,
just even listening to it, I feel lighter and just, I mean, I could use something like that as well. And I think I might look at that and take a look at the schedule. And I mean, our practices are very similar, especially when it comes to journaling and so forth. And it's just, whatever we can do to just come off the autopilot, And I find it's sometimes it's almost harder when you're working in a space like what we're in, because there's that sense of like, obviously we enjoy what we're doing and we're doing everything we can to be of service and get this information out there. But it's like, I mean, you're just coming off of some planes. It's the same. You got to put the oxygen mask on first before helping others, including, before kids. Right? Like we're the best parents if we're aligned and we're feeling good individually first. Yeah. So
absolutely. I know. And that's the I've become in the last year much better at taking care of myself. And I absolutely have been able to show up better for my child in doing that.
Yeah.
But it's a constant, delicate dance. It's like, okay, so when am I, between her needs, which is, I was staring at her yesterday. She's lying on the couch watching her iPad, which is part of my self-care. I'm like, okay, she gets 30 minutes on her iPad so I can meditate, or 20 minutes, whatever it is. And I'm just looking at her, it's like, she is fully dependent on me, not only for, survival, food, water, safety, but like knowing how to be in the world, And so children are the best. I mean, relationships are the best mirror in general. And then children are just the best kind of like keep you accountable.
Oh, yeah.
Your growth and your truth.
Totally. And they let you know when you're off that track very fast without even knowing it, right? It's wild.
It's wild.
So amazing. Well, Kelly, last question for you. If let's just project 30 days in advance. I mean, what would you love to be celebrating? How do you want to feel? Like, what would be just amazing for you?
Oh my gosh, this is so good. 30 days in advance. I mean, I'm really at this phase where I feel like a lot of creativity is bursting through. Like I definitely feel, whether it's eclipse stuff or I had a big birthday. On the lunar eclipse was my birthday, and we were in New Zealand, so it was quite a bit of shake up there. I think I would love to see myself actually execute on and embody what you just prompted me to explore, which is, what do I need to create in my life? What space do I need to create, whether it's once a week, once a day, to just really give myself the time and space to allow that creativity to come through, to allow these profound conversations, connections, experiences to land in me, and I do feel like, whether it's subconscious fear of my ego or whatever, but I do, get caught up in busyness. And there's so much like knocking at the door to burst through. And I just find all these realizations that I'm having over the years that I'm learning and growing, it's like, it's so counterintuitive. The truth is so counterintuitive. You know, we were even talking in New Zealand about like the chakras are actually reversed. So like our crown chakra, you know, is actually down here, and our roots, because the tree, it's just a whole interesting thing that we can talk about in another podcast. But then our roots are really to spirit. So our root chakra is up here, and we're connecting to spirit. So that we had this whole conversation about it. And it's almost like perhaps the wisdom keepers, the masters, wanted to hide things in plain sight because people take things and abuse them for power or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I just often think about that. It's like, you know, and look at time in reverse. And so it's just always, I feel like the truth is always so much more simple, and it's hidden right in front of us and in front of our eyes. And we just, sometimes all we need to do is like just flip things on their head.
Yeah. But that, I feel like that, or what I'm getting from you is that sense of curiosity is like what keeps you going and excited to just explore and try different things, right? And learn different methods. And there's just so much out there. There's so much beauty out there. Well, if it serves as any motivation at all, I mean, of course, I'm speaking for myself, but then there's a whole crew of people, which I'm sure you noticed when Heal released, that, you know, you getting quiet and allowing your beautiful creativity to surface, the ripple effect of that literally can save lives and have so much impact on so many lives, which, and I don't say that from a pressure perspective, but more so from a gratitude of just like giving yourself that space to breathe is just a beautiful, I think, a gift for all of us as well. So
thank
you for what you do.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you. Thank you for what you do and that beautiful reflection back to me. I appreciate it.